Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, no matter where you are. In this fine land of ours, I am so glad you could take time out of your schedule to join us today. This is going to be an in-depth conversation, folks. As you see from the title in front of you, it's all about how to upgrade your data replication. So in the spirit of your schedule, why don't we hop right into it and I'll show you how the whole process works. My name is Daryl Prale. I'm your host. I'm going to be joined by Larry Strickland. And the nice thing about these formats is not only do we give you a bunch of content up front, but we actually take your questions in real time. And the next question we always get is, well, how do I ask those questions? And it's very straightforward. When you logged in, we're using a service called GoToWebinar, and you probably have a GoToWebinar control panel in your upper right corner of your screen. If you look on it, as you see on the screen, there's a section called Questions. Go in there, type in any question you want, as technical as you want, and we will do our best to answer the questions. Typically, we wait till after the core content to answer the questions, but if I see a theme of questions coming on during the show, I may interrupt and throw something Larry's way, just to get that out of the way. So we encourage you to do that. And it doesn't have to be questions. It can be any comments as well. So if you have opinions, you have feedback, let us know. We want to hear. We always are asked, is this session being recorded? Can I get a copy of the slides or a copy of the recording? And the answer is absolutely. So if you don't want that, then don't worry. You don't have to have it. But for those who do want it, you want to share it, you want to review it, get your notes, you're going to get it within a couple days or so of this event taking place. And that way you can watch it on demand as your schedule permits. So again, questions, ask them just in the control panel. Myself, I'm your host. I'm going to make sure we finish on time. I'm going to respect your calendar. And I'm also have the luxury of listening to Larry speak. And he is an expert on this topic. In fact, let me tell you a little bit about Larry. He's the Chief Products Officer responsible for product direction as DataKinetics branches out into more important new business segments. Prior to joining DataKinetics, Larry was the Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Product Management for Natural Convergence, a startup where his technical background and market astuteness was instrumental in developing key product differentiators and forging important business partnerships for the company. Previously, he held various management positions with Nortel Networks during that company's period of high growth and market dominance. Larry holds a PhD and a BE in electrical engineering from the University of Melbourne in Australia, and if that isn't enough, he's even a volunteer firefighter. Larry, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Daryl. Glad to be here.
So, Larry, we've got quite the agenda in front of us today. And for those of you wondering what that is, this is what we're going to cover. 5 key areas. We're going to introduce DataKinetics and SQData. We're going to give you a brief overview of what the upgraded data replication provides. And then we're going to give you some customer examples. And then we're going to give you a blow-by-blow, step-by-step how to do it. And then we'll come back and recap everything with a summary. So with that much content to go, Larry, you tell me when to change the slide and you just keep on talking and I'll be on top of it.
Okay, so first off, as Daryl mentioned, we give you a quick introduction to DataKinetics and SQData. So if we can move on to the next slide. Thanks, Daryl. Okay, so quick introduction to DataKinetics. DataKinetics has been around a number of years. We just passed 35 years. We have a strong team of dedicated technical sales, service people and marketing professionals, and our leader for the last 4 years has been Alan Zada. We've established ourselves as a leader in optimizing transaction processing. We have a unique set of products. We certainly feel we have a unique set of products, and our customers agree with that comment, that look at unique ways to solve mainframe performance and capacity challenges. We've always been an IBM Advanced Business partner. We're a privately held company up in this northern wasteland of Canada, although we do have USA regional offices. We have an international set of customers that are mostly in the Fortune 500. SQData is a company that we've partnered with in the last couple of years, largely because we found a strong affinity to the types of things we were doing with our customers, particularly our joint customers. So SQData has been around more than 12 years now. The first product that they produced focused on IMS data replication, and it proved to be a very superior performance compared to the alternatives available, and it has subsequently grown. The product has grown, and it is now far wider deployed across many different data replication and data migration problem spaces. It has been, as a result, SQData has become a leading provider of high-performance, near real-time change data capture and replication. They provide customers with the best value available for comprehensive data integration solution, and we'll certainly be looking at some of those today, later in the webinar. It's a privately held company based in Texas, and customers like DataKinetics typically across the Fortune 500. So now we're going to move into the next section where we'll provide an overview of data replication and opportunities to upgrade from existing data replication systems. So why would companies need to upgrade a data replication solution? So they may be able to need to replace an older product. Often the data migration or data replication products are generally single purpose, limited to one operating system, one database type, or even just doing migration and not replication. Maybe the business requirements have changed, requiring data to be replicated more frequently. Maybe the performance is a concern. Maybe there are issues with the speed at which stuff gets replicated when not taking advantage of change data. There could be need for additional capabilities in other areas of the company. So, for example, change data capture can be used to improve the performance and availability of data, which is currently available through extract, transform, load. There may be needs for more than one data source, maybe more than one target database system, and potentially there is a transport option change required because the current transport option is getting expensive from a CPU point of view. Maybe there's a need to do more than straight replication or straight migration. Hence the various other components come along with this, such as need to add in more consistency checking. Maybe there's been some problems when databases have got slightly out of sync. Ability to detect conflict when there are multiple systems that can update the data. What happens when you get to do a data update and you discover that you weren't in the state you expected to be when you go to do that update. Opportunity to event publish. So this is ability to publish values to another application. So fraud detection is one that comes to mind when those events occur in the data stream. So the other thing that we note is as data volumes increases, and as much as we'd like our data volumes to go down, they generally only ever go up. You need a cost-effective solution, whether that be the need to reduce CPU consumption, reduce the transport costs, or simply manage the high volume of data that is now being transported. High availability, something that we're finding many customers are moving towards. They were often in high available systems before where the platforms were located concurrently, but maybe they want to move to an environment where they're not concurrent and can't take advantage of hardware replication, and now go into a distributed world, where a distributed data center world where multiple data centers need the same set of data, so that you can offer a continuous availability of your services and the data that's behind them. So this is a problem that, this is a reason why you may upgrade your data migration systems. Application integration and consolidation. There's a number of reasons why this occurs. We spoke to one customer who had an application that was built in the international division and another one that was built in the domestic division, and they suddenly realized they're making two applications. Well, one option is to use data replication as a way to consolidate the data from those two different systems while they migrate the application over and actually become a single application. Often, in this case, they had non-homogeneous databases or diverse databases, which are causing them problems, but this also occurs when there are diverse platforms, maybe a mainframe and a Linux system. All this is possible, helps consolidate applications. This may occur as a result of acquisition or merger, where multiple applications come together. It's another scenario. Hence the need to optimize mergers and acquisitions. So the ability to do virtual data integration while applications are consolidated and converted to a single system, or even never converted and migrated to a single system, because once you've got the data integration, you've actually achieved most of the business value and things can move ahead. Also, when you go into those mergers and acquisitions, there's a strong desire to lead to consolidated reporting. So we're being able to merge your data, consolidate your data, so through migration and replication, you're in a situation where you can provide consolidated reporting. Business intelligence, one common problem that many companies face is that they'd love to delve into their big data and actually understand some business intelligence, draw some conclusions from it, but their systems that are actually sustaining the data and containing the data have the challenge that they weren't ever designed to provide business intelligence type reporting. So the challenge being is if you put that business intelligence load on that system, you're going to cause problems. So there's a need to get the data to a new system. So the ability to transform that data, replicate the data that's required, only replicate the change data to that business intelligence system where you can run your reports on potentially near real-time data is often something that many businesses are looking for. People move off the mainframe, we understand that, but so far we're not talking purely about the mainframe, we're talking about mainframe, Linux, Windows, doesn't matter the system, it'll work across it. But as companies are moving off the mainframe, there is a need to migrate their data off the mainframe. There is a need to often sustain data between a distributed system and the mainframe, why that migration occurs. And again, the right data migration tool, the right data replication tool can drastically reduce the risk that you would incur as you move off the mainframe. So quick introduction to SQData. So there are several components that make up the SQData solution. There are capture agents. These capture agents are co-resident with the sources, and it doesn't really matter what the sources are. They can be IMS, any relational database. They can be queues. They can be files. Just anything that actually has some kind of record structure, so that an index can be identified. So the capture agents capture either the data in the case of migration or the change data in the case of change data capture, and they pass this on to an integration engine. The integration engine is a script-driven process that uses a script to determine what path the data is going to take. It can transform the data, it can merge the data, and it can take intelligent decisions on the data. But primarily what it's going to do is it's going to take that data and move it to the target database, data storage. Again, that could be IMS, that could be any of the numerous relational databases, it could be a queue or a file. And the source and target do not need to be the same. Often and you'll see later with the examples, we have IMS going to relational, we have relational going to IMS, etc. So the other thing the integration engine can do is it can actually do lookups as the data is traversing the integration engine. So this gives you the ability to scrub the data, and this gives you the ability to use other data to help with your transform and also determine final destination. Overseeing this is a control center that basically determines whether the capture agents integrations are running, whether they're up, what state they're in. And there is also an integration center which helps you build the scripts by actually being able to read in the various data schemas from either the sources or targets and help you do that data mapping and provide all those processes to do the data mapping when you're creating the script. So some advantages here. So a single tool that effectively provides many replication problems. So doesn't matter what the source is, doesn't matter what the destination is, actually being able to get to multiple transport options. So you can use MQ series or you can use a raw TCP/IP form of transport. You can also filter the data at source, so you only need to replicate the data that needs to be replicated. Maybe there's data that isn't used in a business intelligence report, so as a result, you don't need to replicate that data to the business intelligence database. You can transform the data, so you need to be able to validate the data. Where is the 51st state of the US? Well, that's invalid data, right? You can ensure quality. You can also trigger on specific data changes. So as data changes come through this engine, you can trigger, send that off to a business intelligence system, a fraud detection system, etc. And all this can be done in near real time with enterprise-wide scalability. And we'll actually give you some numbers later on that give you some idea as to how big that is. So top 5 features: any source, any target, very important. Scalable architecture. The scaling of the application is as simple as adding more engines. You can do selective replication. You don't need to replicate the entire database, only the tables or even parts of tables that you need to be replicated to destination. You can transform the data, and as many of you will know, if you're going from different databases, if you're transferring data between different databases, data transformation is a must. You can't do it without data transformation. And finally, the ability to audit. Have my source and destination, do they look the same still after I started doing these changes? And lastly, triggering, being able to trigger on what data has changed. You know, if a dollar amount goes through this greater than 5,000, maybe you need to tell a fraud application that's occurred. Replication options are numerous. You can go one-to-one, that's the obvious one that everyone recognizes. You can go from one to many, so you might have a master data source that gets replicated out to several regions, as an example, and they can each have a copy of the data that's replicated, maybe nightly or maybe continuously on the fly. Many to one, so this is often business intelligence, where you've got many internal databases that you want to capture the data for and move that to a single business intelligence data store to run your business intelligence on. And obviously many to many. So the ability to go from many databases to many databases. Again, that could be for a number of business reasons. So the SQData product is designed for a complete enterprise solution. So there are a number of components that make it up, which we talked about before. So a number of different capture agents, and rather components that support the overall system. Combining these effectively gives you the ability to provide a high availability, continuous availability of that data, support business intelligence operations, provide operational data stores, do data integration between different applications as we talked about before, monitor what's happening so that you can update other systems, and also being able to improve the existing ETL systems by adding change data capture to an existing bulk mass transfer load. So now some customer examples, and it's definitely the customer examples I find the most useful.
So as we get ready to do the customer examples, I just want to remind everybody that as Larry's overviewing the solution, the natural tendency is to have a lot of follow-on questions, and you can ask those. Simply go to your control panel, go to the questions section, submit your questions, and we'll take them afterwards. Over to you, Larry.
Thanks, Daryl. Thanks for the reminder. So one of the large banks in North America actually had a challenge. It was actually, they recognized internally that because they had 3 data centers and their current synchronization mechanism between the different data centers was rather slow, they actually had an internally identifiable fraud challenge problem where accounts could be emptied in 3 different data centers, 3 times, so you end up with 3 times the money that was in one account. So they had DB2 databases in 3 large data centers spread from coast to coast in North America. And they needed to keep all those 3 databases in sync. And they were looking for not only a solution that worked to solve their fraud problem, but something that they could afford. So the solution that came about was SQData. It was able to easily demonstrate an active replication mechanism where most transactions were completed sub-second. And it does depend a little on the transaction itself as to how rapidly it can be replicated through the 3 data centers, but most of their normal transactions were completing easily within a second. And as a result of being able to show this, SQData was the chosen solution for this particular bank. So high availability with a very high volume. So in this case, we're switching out of the financial industry and going to a transportation industry. So it's a company that had hundreds of millions of updates per day. The data center, if the data center is unavailable, they have this business problem where it can actually take them months to catch up to the data that they've lost or failed to replicate, even if it's only been out for a few minutes. So they're looking for high availability. Most of the data was IMS they're looking to keep highly available, but not only that, they used a backup process, and the backup system was a DB2 database. So they also knew that the cost of doing this with some of the alternatives out there was going to cost them a lot in terms of additional CPU required, and they're looking for another solution. So again, strangely enough, the solution was SQData. It demonstrated its ability to handle the high volume loads, and managed to show that the replication choices this company was looking for were very easy to achieve, attained their high availability requirements, and without a huge impact on CPU, and in fact almost no impact on the IMS subsystems. Okay, so going on to the next example, again switching industries, this time in the health industry. This was a case where the company wanted to replicate their MS data, so obviously SQData is a candidate for that, but they also wanted a portion of the data, not all the data, just a portion of the data routed to an Oracle ODS system to meet their business needs. So what they did, there were 400 tables to be replicated, and of those 100 would be to be replicated to the Oracle operational data store. So solution, again, SQData showed that it could do this high availability replication process between the IMS systems. We've already discussed that, but it was also able to selectively migrate any changes for those 100 tables to the Oracle operational data store, and as a result of being able to show this was the chosen implementation. So high volume replication. So we're switching back to the finance industry, in this case a credit card company. This company had extremely high volumes of credit card transactions, well over 100 million transactions per day. This was being put into an IMS database. However, the IMS database, great for the transactions coming from the credit cards, but their actual reporting needs were in the DB2 side of things. So what they were looking for, again, is a system that could replicate the two IMS databases and at the same time replicate the same data through to a DB2 system, because the reporting was run against the DB2 system. And again, as we've talked through the previous examples, this is something that SQData can clearly do and achieve quite easily, and SQData was chosen largely because in doing this, the impact on CPU was minimal compared to the alternatives. Application integration. I mentioned earlier that I'd come back to an example on this, and now I'm doing that. So this case, it was a company that had needed to merge a number of applications. They had evolved separately. The reason they'd evolved separately is one was built in an international division, and the other one was built in a domestic division. The international division had happened to chosen DB2 as its primary data store, and the domestic division had chosen IMS, and they obviously had different applications driving those. They had this strong desire to move to a single application, and as part of that, they needed to go to a new data schema. So whilst their target data storage was DB2, it was actually going to be a different DB2 schema than what was in their original application. So as part of moving down this path, their approach was to first off take the two applications and have their data replicated to the new schema on DB2 with using the powerful abilities of SQData to transform the data as necessary and transform the schema as necessary to the new solution. And then they were able to slowly over time evolve their various applications that use those data stores over to the new data schema, while still providing the capability for the old applications to continue to run in the existing environments. So it was a smooth transition. Obviously, their plan in the not too distant future is to be able to turn off this replication because they'll have migrated all their applications to the new system. Switching back to healthcare. In this situation, a company was doing replication from a DB2 system to an Oracle system. They actually wanted to be able to have a mechanism where they could investigate any claims as this data migration occurred that should have been researched further by their fraud group. So again, SQData was able to do this. So as that data was replicated across, as the claims were replicated across the Oracle system in this case, where those claims met certain criteria, they're automatically published and routed to the fraud department for further investigation. Okay, so now that we've gone through the examples, here's a step-by-step guide as to how we upgrade. This is normally done in a proof of concept to show companies how they're going to do it before they actually do the work. So I will be referring to proof of concept as we run this through. So the first step is identification and analysis of what data is to replicate, is what you're looking at there. Then you need to convert that, what you've identified and analyzed, into scripts that would run in the SQData engine. Then you need to obviously install SQData. Then you would deploy and run this proof of concept in parallel with your existing environment, so that you can validate that in fact the SQData function is doing what it requires. Once that's been fully validated, there's the opportunity to obviously cut over to an upgraded form of replication. So identification and analysis, what goes into it? So the first thing you have to do is identify the source and destination for any tables or any data that's going to be used in the proof of concept. And you need to look at how many scenarios involved, how many tables are needed for each scenario. So then gather information about what is to be replicated. So you need the source descriptions, what exact data, what is the table columns and types of indexes and things like that, and target descriptions, similar information, any user exits that are being used, transformation logic. So if there is a need to transform the data or the schema, what is the logic that would be used to do that transform? And then identify any complexities in the data or logic. So are there filters to be used? Should data be thrown away if it doesn't meet certain criteria? Is there any other special processing that needs to occur on the data? Then there's the environmental considerations. So number of processes, are there any other corporate processes that would interfere with this, such as security processes? And this we're really talking about who can install the software, who has access to the source and target destinations, what about security with regards to transmission. So in the conversion process, you need to convert current data replication logic into SQData. Often this is relatively simple. There are always exceptions, unfortunately, but this is normally a relatively simple process. It's just a matter of drawing up the schema from the source, drawing up the schema from the destination, and matching the two up in the tool that SQData provides. There are factors that you need to consider that will affect the time it takes to build these scripts. Obviously, with more tables, it's going to take longer. The size of the tables, or the number of columns within the tables, is obviously an important factor as well. If the number of data transformations is large, most of them, as I said, most of them can be identified automated. That's not a huge deal. However, if there are complex data transformations, this can take longer. If there are a large number of user exits, this can take longer. And obviously, filters has an impact. You've got to create the filter, and you've got to build that into your logic to make sure the filters are applied. There are some additional factors for IMS to DB2 conversions. It's largely because IMS being hierarchical in nature, the mapping process to DB2 is typically a little bit more complicated. And also often some of the IMS data structures tend to get a little bit more complex because of the hierarchical nature. So some of the things that need to be analyzed: keys within the data structure, any data field challenges that need to occur. So do you need to detect invalid data through this place? What are the date formats? Obviously, there's many dates formats. Text comment fields, what are their lengths? Are there any binary or special fields? Do you need to redefine segments or fields? So you may have simple redefines or complex redefines. Do you have repeating groups? Do you have segments that are non-keyed? And do you have continuation segments, which is something that we've seen typically in the older application type. So a typical timeline for data replication. So once we've agreed that we're going to try proof of concept for data replication, then the first thing has to be identify what information is required and do the analysis. Typically, it takes about 5 working days to get the converted tables and software provided, test environment set up, and install the scripts in the test system to go ahead. There's then the actual proof of concept period where you're proving this in, and then there's another 5 days of testing and validation of the data replication process. So roles within this process, so there's typically a project leader, which is a combined between customer and DataKinetics. So the customer will need to provide the subject matter experts with regards to the data sources and destination, and DataKinetics provide the technical engineers to actually help with the installation that's necessary, prepare scripts, and understand any nuances of the environment that need special handling. So we'll always work together with our customers to find the goals of the trial, identify the tables, run the tests, and validate the results. Data validation. So we like to think that data validation is not as challenging as many people think. So human verification. So often during the data validation process, something comes up that needs human interaction. Often what we like to do is detect these as they're going on during the initial conversion, and then we automate that. So we start to build that human verification that is required into the scripts, and then you get automated verification. So out of this, you would get the various counts and checksums, compare source target fields with the same attributes, etc. So one thing that really helps is if an existing tool vendor is able to assist with this ability to extract the existing scripts or the existing business logic out of the tool that's doing data replication today. So one thing that often where the SQData tool gets used is to upgrade existing ETL. So that this is where there's already a process in place that is doing a bulk extract, transform, and load. So pulling data out of one database system, doing the transforms necessary on it, and loading it into a second database system. So we go through a very similar process to one I just described for the proof of concept for upgrading existing ETL process. We're basically going to replicate that extract, transform, load that was done in the original case, but in this case we're going to be acting on change data. So we're going to capture the change data, put it through the same transform that the ETL would have done, and then load the data into the source, the target database. And as a result, we're able to upgrade that existing ETL, which is a batch process often run once a week, to something that can actually be almost instantaneous in terms of replicating the data to the target system. So one of the things we find with customers is once they've taken advantage of the SQData product, they actually can start taking advantage of this tool after they've used it to upgrade their basic data replication. So the same product often then gets used for other things within the company. So business intelligence, data warehousing, as we talked before, because you can take the data from various different source databases and transform as necessary to move it into the data warehouse or the business intelligence application. We talked about application integration, obviously something that's very palatable if you are moving forward with various applications. And lastly, application conversion. I actually walked through a customer example of this where you have 2 different applications that need to be converted into a new one, and it can be very complicated if you try and do this with a flash cut. By using data replication, you're able to do this over time. So now, quick summary of some of the things we've covered today. So if you have any of these data challenges, do you have a product that is going obsolete or doesn't meet your changing need? Is your data growing faster than your extract, transform, load can cope with? Do you need to move to a high availability scenario? Is it important that your data be continuously available? Do you have a high transaction activity where the sheer volume of data to be captured and replicated is becoming a challenge? Do you have a need to aggregate your data from multiple heterogeneous or diverse data sources for business intelligent use or data warehousing? Do you need to convert data used by legacy applications for use by new applications? Whether this is a one-time conversion, so a one-shot deal, or seamless coexistence with data actually replicated backwards and forwards. Do you require real-time detection and processing of business events? And in this case, with the business events defined within the data. So, is performance becoming an issue? Is this the reason you may want to look at a new tool because the existing tool doesn't meet the performance requirements that you have? So, SQData, Enterprise Data Replication Solution. It's kind of like a bit of a Swiss Army knife. It has many different components. It can be used in many different things. So it provides a single solution that solves many of the data challenges enterprises face today. So if you need assurance that you can always access your data and you need a higher availability configuration, if you need seamless interworking between legacy and new applications at the data level, if you need to consolidate multiple data sources into a single view for an operational data store or business intelligence, or the other one is obviously data warehousing. Do you have an existing ETL solution that either isn't running fast enough or can't run fast enough? Does it need to be augmented? Do you need to handle large volumes of data with enterprise scalability? Does it need to fit within the existing version control framework? The scripts that I talked about before all fit within the existing framework. And you're going to have to bear with me for a moment because my computer decided to shut down, to go to sleep. It's awake now. So this overall process can be completely automated to eliminate human errors, and that includes the detection of collision at the apply side. It is the best solution for IMS replication, and particularly gets used in a large number of cases for IMS to DB2 data replication. So if you are looking to upgrade an existing solution for whatever reason, please consider SQData. It gives you not only the things you need to upgrade, but it also gives you so much more.
All right. That was a mouthful, but you did awesome, Larry. I mean, we went through that in about 35 minutes, and that was a lot of content. So I appreciate everybody for staying tuned. We didn't lose a single individual, Larry, so you're just clearly captivating. Well done. Remind you again that you can submit your questions. We've got some questions that have come in here, but to do that, you simply, in your GoToWebinar control panel, probably in the upper right corner of your screen, go to the questions section and submit your questions that way. Ask anything, and Larry will respond in real time so we can see just how smart he really is. But clearly we can tell he knows what he's talking about here. Larry, let's have some fun and start doing some questions. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, so the first question we have here is, it's a little open-ended, but the question is fundamentally saying, you're saying it's efficient. So they want to know if you can expand. Like, what do you mean by that?
So compared to the alternative solutions, the SQData product is efficient. When we say efficient, it's got improved performance in two areas. The first one is just the amount of CPU it needs to do all the tasks it does in capturing change data and replicating it. It is more efficient than all the other tools in terms of the amount of additional CPU that is required to complete this process. So it's very efficient on CPU. The other thing is it's very efficient on the cost of transmission. So the cost of transmission is a combination of bandwidth and the amount of CPU that's used to drive that bandwidth. The product has within it its own proprietary TCP/IP approach to replicate data that is extremely efficient. Many other solutions require on MQ series, which is great because the SQData product uses those from time to time. It's certainly a valid way to deploy. But when that's starting to become costly in terms of either CPU or bandwidth, then its own internal mechanism that it uses is far more efficient and uses a lot less CPU and bandwidth to achieve the results it needs.
Excellent. This is a good question here, this one. Just a moment of clarity, I guess. They're asking, is this a data replication product or is this a data migration product?
I guess it's both. So it can be used to do a data migration. So typically when we're talking about a data migration, we're talking about taking a database and withdrawing the data from it, moving it over to another database, and migrating all the data over, and the transform process we talked about is applied. When this occurs once or very irregularly, it's often referred to as data migration because you're taking it out of one database and putting it in another database. When we're talking about data replication, we're talking about doing that process many times. And in fact, in the case of SQData, we're talking about doing that as the data changes. So the ability to detect data has changed in the source database, capturing what those changes are, and automatically applying them almost immediately to the target database. And that's typically what we're referring about data replication. So it might be semantics of the English language, but that's what we mean when we talk about data replication, and what we talk about when we talk about data migration.
All right. Just a reminder, if you do want to submit your questions, do it now. We're getting near the end of the questions that have been submitted. So your chances are you're running out of time, I guess is what I'm saying. Just in the control section. Control panel, go to questions, submit away. In the interim, Larry, we have an interesting one here. Replicating IMS data can be difficult. Does this timeline apply to IMS as well?
I assume that's referring to the proof of concept timeline. The proof of concept timeline is fairly consistent. Actually, what we find is what expands the timeline is because resources within the company that's doing it aren't available. They're busy with other projects. But once we have access to the resources, that timeline is pretty consistent. What can extend it is particularly large number of tables, particularly complex tables are chosen for replication. It can expand it a bit. But generally, no, within 15 days, it's quite easy to achieve any reasonable proof of concept.
Excellent. We're out of questions, folks. So let's just cap this up. If you like what you heard here today and you want to see it again, then stay tuned, because everybody who's registered for the event will get a link in the coming days where they can watch this show on demand. Share it with your coworkers, share it with your peers. And if you have any additional questions as a result of that, we encourage you to reach out to Larry directly. You'll see in front of you his email address and his phone number. So the very same man who's shared all this knowledge is readily accessible to you. Larry, I want to say thank you for your time today. You've been a wonderful, wonderful speaker. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Daryl. And yeah, thanks for all your assistance.
No problem. If you have more questions about DataKinetics, just check us out at dkl.com. But until then, thanks a lot for joining us today, folks. Have a fantastic day.